You're watching Dante's Boxing Nation. L&D on the track.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Well, it's been a devastating year for HBO and Jim Lampley. I want to go ahead and play this clip of what Jim Lampley had to say about Al Heyman and the PBC series a couple years ago, and then I'm going to give you my closing thoughts after I show you guys this clip.
Final word. 19 months ago, the whole boxing community looked forward to the arrival of a powerful new enterprise which promised a chance to restore boxing to broader exposure and greater sports world prominence, more in keeping with its glorious past. More than $500 million in venture capital was stockpiled to be put to use in a daring plan to buy prime time on a wide variety of television networks. The series would be called Premier Boxing Champions. The goal was to demonstrate there was an unobserved audience that would erupt to ultimately incentivize those television networks to reverse the equation and pay for the fights. As many as 200 fighters bought in, among them some of the most accomplished young fighters on the planet: Keith Thurman, Adrian Broner, Danny Garcia, Adonis Stevenson, and Mikey Garcia were all potential top 10 pound-for-pound guys who had been given main event exposure here on HBO. Deontay Wilder had already won a heavyweight belt. The pièce de résistance, Errol Spence, came off the 2012 United States Olympic team. Could it really only have been a year and a half? Seems longer. And maybe because despite the extraordinary accumulation of talent and the seeming abundance of money, competitive fights like Leo Santa Cruz versus Abner Maris and Keith Thurman versus Sean Porter have been few and far between. For the most part, PBC stars have been given faint-hearted matchups against lackluster opponents, followed by long layoffs with predictable results in TV ratings and advertising sales. You might have thought that Spence's windfall audience of more than 6 million viewers in the NBC time slot just prior to Rio's closing ceremony would have given PBC a rejuvenated bounce. But in late September, NBC announced that 2 primetime PBC cards in December were dropped for now, and along with them, 3 shows on NBC Sports Network. For the last 3 months of 2016, there are no scheduled PBC shows. If PBC disappears, there'll be an urge to see that as a devastating loss. In truth, it was predictable. Nearly 40 years of delivery via subscription channels like this one and our primary competitor have accustomed boxing's audience to seeing a continuous story, uninterrupted by commercials. On commercial television, the mini-dramas in the corners between rounds are visible only as taped flashbacks. As live entertainment, it's not the same thing. Boxing's next shot in the arm will emerge gradually as the high-profile and highly skilled fighters on the PBC roster begin to achieve free agency and reintegrate into the upper landscape. In the best of all possible worlds, someday Thurman and Spence will match up with Terrence Crawford. Deontay Wilder will fight Anthony Joshua, and Adonis Stevenson will at long last face Sergey Kovalev. The path to that goal will require the unique brand of ingenuity, bravery, and passion that fuels real boxing promoters. People who are capable of doing one of the world's hardest jobs. As we can now see, there's a great deal more to it than merely raising and spending $500 million. Thanks for being with us on this edition of The Fight Club.
Boy, I tell you, the irony of this story is just amazing. I mean, this has got to be karma on the highest level. If you guys listen to everything Jim Lampley said, one of the things that stood out, a lot of things he said stood out, but he basically said that PBC was going to fail. And he said it wasn't a surprise that they were failing. That's what he said. He also said that PBC's goal was to give the networks an incentive for them to pay for the fights as opposed to the promoter having to pay for the fights. Jim Lampley, he felt it was impossible. It would never happen. There's no way Al Heyman would get these networks to pay for the fights. You fast forward to present day, and you look at the groundbreaking deal that Al Heyman did with Fox, and now Fox is doing exactly what Jim Lampley said could not be done or would not happen. And that is, of course, paying for these PBC fights on the network. I mean, it's just so ironic, the coincidence that HBO Boxing sinks and goes out of business in 2018, the same year that PBC Boxing cements itself as the #1 boxing program on television for 2018. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and read to you guys some of these stats if you haven't read them already. That's on the screen right now. Sunday's Fox PBC fight delivered an average audience of 2,114,000 for Fox, for Deportes and Fox streaming platforms combined, according to Nielsen research. Now, the fight that they're referring to is the Charlo brothers card. I already did a video on it and told you guys that that fight, or that card, turned out to be the most watched fight, #2 the most watched fight on television this year in the United States. And that 2.1 million number that I gave you guys, that was not the highest number. That was just the average number. What the numbers had average, but the fight peaked at 2.5 million. That's why it makes no sense when you hear some of these fans, some of these decafs, not even real boxing fans, but some of these decafs saying, oh, those numbers are BS. They only did those numbers because it was on free TV. But that's not true. For those of you guys who don't know this, Oscar De La Hoya, he used to have a contract with Fox. He would host a fight card on Fox almost every week for free. Now ask me how many of those cards did 2.5 million views. You already know the answer. In fact, none of the cards that Oscar De La Hoya put on Fox even did 500,000 views. Matter of fact, when Leo Santa Cruz, when he fought against Abner Mares, that fight was also on free TV. And that fight, it did 1.4 million views. Now you have two big names, and you have two Mexican fighters with big names, with that built-in Mexican fan base, and that fight card, once again, only brought in 1.4 million views. The crazy thing is, the Charlo card, they didn't even have a supporting cast, meaning they were the only ones that were promoting the fight. Only the Charlo brothers was promoting that fight. They didn't have an opponent that had a name as big as theirs. So once again, they were only promoting that fight just with their names alone. And they still did 1 million more views than a Leo Santa Cruz versus Abner Mares fight on the same network. Getting back to Jim Lampley, it's amazing to me because Jim Lampley, when he had his show, Jim Lampley, he had never talked about another network or a promoter and talked about them how they were bad for the sport or saying that they were going to fail. He didn't do this with Showtime before Al Heyman came along. HBO never mentions another network that doesn't even work with them. But Jim Lampley has so much disdain for Al Heyman that he felt the need to try his best to discredit all of what Al Heyman and the PBC series was attempting to do. Once again, guys, this proves that Jim Lampley and all the other decafs that hated Floyd Mayweather, it never had anything to do with them hating Floyd Mayweather's personality. It was because of his complexion they didn't like him. Because once again, you see Jim Lampley is talking about Al Heyman the same way he talks about Floyd Mayweather. And the crazy thing is, Al Heyman has never did an interview. I mean, you got Oscar De La Hoya, you got Bob Arum. They've said some outlandish stuff in some of their interviews, and Jim has never criticized them. But here he is criticizing a man that has never done one single interview. You don't even know what his views are on anything, but yet that's the person that Jim Lampley goes after on his show. Like I said, when Oscar De La Hoya struck that deal with Fox, Jim Lampley didn't say anything about Oscar De La Hoya, him possibly failing. I mean, with all the mismatches that have been put on TV, Jim Lampley has never said anything about Top Rank mismatches, Oscar De La Hoya Golden Boy mismatches, but once again, he feels the need to talk about Al Heyman. And it turns out, once again, in 2018, PBC was crowned as the #1 boxing program on television, while HBO, on the other hand, at least HBO Boxing, they were on life support. In 2018 is when HBO decided to pull the plug. So clearly, Jim Lampley and even Larry Merchant, they ain't too good at trying to tell the future. They're far from prophets. Because I remember Jim Lampley, I remember Larry Merchant, Larry Merchant, he used to say about 5-10 years ago, before Floyd Mayweather fought against Oscar De La Hoya, before Floyd Mayweather was a superstar in the business, Jim Lampley used to say that Floyd Mayweather will never be a star. Larry Merchant, he hated Floyd Mayweather so much, the more impressive his wins were, like when Floyd Mayweather was getting impressive knockout wins over Philip Endo or Manfredi, etc., the more he won, Larry Merchant, he would say at the end of the event, yeah, he's getting impressive knockouts, but he will never be a star. He would always say, look at the empty seats in the arena. He will never be a star. I remember there was one fight when Floyd Mayweather was still signed to Bob Arum, and as Floyd Mayweather was fighting Larry Merchant, he shared a story how he talked to Bob Arum, and Bob Arum had said that Floyd Mayweather, he wanted to put a big, huge banner on the MGM Grand to promote his fight. And he was saying how Bob Arum said, I just don't see the reason to do that. That's just a waste of money, because Floyd Mayweather, he's seen Britney Spears do it. And he was like, we need to have that same type of banner. Bob didn't want to do it. And Larry Merchant was agreeing with Bob Arum, of course. He was saying, yeah, it makes no sense. That's a waste of money. You're not a star. So why should we waste money by putting your banner on the building? This is just so funny to me because you fast forward, I don't know, about 6 or 8 years later when Floyd Mayweather left Bob Arum and MGM Grand, they decide to put a permanent large banner of Floyd Mayweather where it reads, Home of the Champion Floyd Mayweather. That banner was on the building year around. It didn't even matter if Floyd Mayweather was fighting or not. They kept this large banner on the building. And Bob Arum, who refused to put that banner on the building for Floyd Mayweather, later on, once Floyd got what he wanted, Bob Arum was pissed off because when he was trying to promote Manny Pacquiao fights at the MGM Grand, they refused to take down Floyd Mayweather's banner the week that Manny Pacquiao was fighting Tim Bradley in a rematch. So you didn't want him to put his banner up. Now you can't even get them to take his banner down even when you're trying to promote your own fight. That is an amazing turn of events right there. No doubt about it. They was hoping that Floyd Mayweather would fail. They were hoping that Al Haymon would fail. If you guys notice, the people that they hate the most on the coincidental list are always the most successful. Those are the ones that they fear. See, they don't care about the fighters on a coincidental list that fail, or maybe they're just not as successful as the Al Haymons and the Floyd Mayweathers because they're not looked at as threats. This is the reason why Jim Lampley, he didn't go after 50 Cent when he was promoting fights the way he went after Al Haymon. So we know what time it is. But at the end of the day, I'll close out with saying this. In 2018, Al Haymon in the PBC series on Fox becomes the #1 boxing network in the country, while the most racist commentator on HBO is basically out of a job. That's some serious ass karma right there. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.